Hello, 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 everybody. My name is Lee Perry, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Ideas for Us. Here, giving you an amazing event once again called the Youth Climate Activist Panel. This is a personal favorite event that I get to have the honor of planning because, as much as my voice is being heard little by little, Ideas for Us is growing. I believe that the only way we can combat climate change is to lift the voice of other organization leaders, especially those who are youth-led, because our youth is our future and we have to empower them and encourage them to have a platform to speak their minds and to talk about their experiences when they're organizing people in their community and in their age group. So today we are going to be introducing you to some amazing youth climate activist leaders who aren't even just involved in just climate, they're involved with social justice issues and political issues. And it runs deep because it's very interdisciplinary. So I'm so excited to lift their voices. But before I get into that, I just want to talk about Ideas for Us. For those of you who don't know, our mission is to develop, fund, and scale solutions to solve the world's most pressing environmental issues. And how we do that is we meet once a month at each of our chapters all over the world, and we host these Ideas Hive meetings where we talk about climate change. That education should be free, and people should feel confident in learning from one another, and hearing from experts right in their community about climate change and how those things impact them as individuals. And then we organize and we have really awesome opportunities like eco action committees for people to fundraise and develop a budget for us to be able to go out and do boots on the ground action projects. We call our budget the Solutions Fund, which is the budget that we give micro grants to each of our branches to be able to do these eco action projects. So we have grant writing teams, we have activist teams that are helping to find resources in our community. We also have other education experiences and workshops and fee-for-service opportunities. But the ultimate goal is to create enough awareness to generate a demand that can help support an eco enterprise. And our best example of this is fleet farming, where in 2014, we were able to organize the community around agricultural issues. And we created an urban agriculture enterprise that now has its own brand, its own revenue generating system, and it's able to employ its own staff. And each of these eco enterprises that we're trying to develop, and each of these one-off eco action projects that we're trying to get people in the community to do, they are all around energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. And these are our focus areas that help guide our impact in these different communities in Nepal, Rwanda, Ghana, Guinea, Uganda, here in Orlando, Florida, all over the world. And we are trying to grade our impact based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are incredible goals that were put together by the UN in order to spread awareness, but also hold different countries accountable for their actions and set some key indicators for us to basically be transparent about things like climate change and hunger issues and quality of work and discrimination issues. And as of right now, when it comes to climate change, no country is on track to hitting some of their SDGs. And this is important because even the small boots on the ground action projects add up to all of us being able to hit those goals. We can't just sit back and wait for companies to care. Some companies care, but we can't just ask them nicely. At a certain point, it's the youth too that really have to be out there showing what we demand for our future. And so that is all encompassing of our organization ideas. Again, boots on the ground action, very important for us to come together as a community and to mobilize and to be able to implement these things. Again, I brought up some of our focus areas. We try to do solar workforce training programs, urban agriculture, We do waste audits, beach cleanups, tree planting, shoreline projects. And yes, we are a global organization, but that does not mean that you can't do these things in your own community too. That we were grassroots. We started with no money in the bank. We started with, for the first 5 years, not a single paid employee. And we organized these eco action projects with no money. We just learned how to say please and ask for help and to get volunteers to come together and to commit to doing these types of projects. And now here we are, able to have an entire team and an entire staff. So if there's one major thing that you can take away from me before I hand it off to our amazing guests, it's that you have the power to organize these things too. Whether you have a big company behind you supporting you, or if you just want to get a couple friends together and go and collect trash along the beach or even in your community, you have the power to do that. And so tonight, we're going to go ahead and just let each of our panelists introduce themselves. And we're going to give them 5 to 10 minutes to just talk about who they are, why they wake up in the morning passionate about committing themselves to, environmental advocacy or whatever type of advocacy they're doing in their community groups. And our first speaker is Aaria. Welcome. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello. So I'm Aaria. I'm from Kenya, and I'm a second-year environmental studies student at UCF. But a little background about me is that I grew up in Kenya, which is a third world country, and that means that I've experienced firsthand the effects of climate change. The major effect that I experienced was drought, and this caused a lot of starvation and struggles for the communities, especially the rural communities in my country. And I was lucky enough to be privileged to go to a top private school in my country, and they instilled in us the importance of community service. So every week, the students would spend 2 to 4 hours per week on these various projects. One of them would be a plastic water bottle collection. And we would have competitions on who could collect the highest amount of water bottles. And then we would give this to a company that would create water filtration systems using the plastic water bottles, and these would be taken into rural communities and into the slums in my country. And we would also have other projects where we would go and educate other communities, especially the rural communities, on the importance of no littering and recycling and things like that. And so through these community service projects, I got to really see the effect that our governments have on the development of a country in the aspect of the values that they choose to keep, especially thinking about the environment. And so I saw a huge gap between the vulnerable and the less vulnerable. And my goal has always been to bridge that gap. And the way that I believe that we can do that is with sustainability. Because sustainability is intersectional. And so one project that I recently came up with is called Solution Over Pollution. Its aim is to teach residential communities in my country on the importance of reducing their waste. And so we also teach them on the importance of recycling. It to a recycling company in Kenya to promote more zero waste living. And all these experiences drove me with the passion to create change. And thus I decided to study environmental science at UCF. And I believe that in the theory that if you want to make change, that you should create change in your own home and your own community first before trying to make change in bigger, more global areas. So that's why my activism focuses on encouraging the people around me and the communities around me to be more sustainable. And I also think that if I want to make a bigger impact, that I should spread the knowledge that I have to communities outside of the environmental industry. That way I'm spreading the knowledge to everyone. Because if I keep it within the environmental community, it's like a bubble that isn't helping anyone. And yeah, so next slide, please. I also worked as an intern at a environmental consultancy agency for the railway in my country, and it was to regulate the environmental impacts that constructing the railway would have in the middle of the national park, and to activism because and things like that. And another thing I do with my activism is I attend climate strikes. I help other organizations like Ideas for Us and some organizations in my country like Wild Now Foundation, which is a startup. And so my overall aim is to create a systemic and global change and to include more intersectional and sustainable values for future generations and to reduce the gap between the vulnerable and the less vulnerable. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. All right, Lana, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lana Weidgenant. You might have seen me before in another live stream by Ideas for Us, such as the one organized by Orlando Zero Hour on food systems. That was a really great conversation, or also on the podcast that I did with Ideas for Us, just a wonderful group. So about myself, I am currently an undergraduate student at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm studying public health with a special focus on environment and on policy. I'm also the Deputy Director of Partnerships at Zero Hour. And if you haven't heard of Zero Hour, we are an international climate justice organization, especially focusing on centering the voices of youth on the front lines who are already being impacted by climate change. And what I do at Zero Hour is I manage our partnerships. So that means the work that we do with other organizations and campaigns, such as working with Greenpeace, 350.org, NRDC, large campaigns, ideas by young people, technology, all those kinds of things. So it's really exciting work, especially for an international movement. I'm also outreach director at the National Children's Campaign, which is an organization that works on the issues which most impact youth and children in America. So we work on issues including environment and climate, health, education, child welfare, gun violence, economic security, child immigration, LGBTQ plus rights, a ton of issues, basically those that impact most our youngest generations. I am also a climate activist advisor for the American Lung Association, and there I am helping them with their activism campaigns and the intersection of climate change and clean air, which worsening climate change actually worsens air quality. And I am the co-founder and co-executive youth director of Cultivate America, which is a youth-focused organization on food system solutions to the climate crisis. So food systems aren't really talked about enough in climate action, and they're actually one of the best solutions we know to mitigate the climate crisis. I think that's really, really important, and especially teaching young people what we can do tangibly to fight against climate change when our politicians and our leaders aren't doing enough. Some other organizations that I am also involved in include I am an ambassador for Real Food Systems alongside Josh, who will be speaking later, so I'm sure he'll touch more on that and how you can get involved. I'm also an advisory board member at Plant Dining Partnerships, working on more accessibility of plant-based food options. I'm a youth ambassador for the Food Prints for the Future program of Earth Day Network, again, talking about how food connects to climate. And I'm also a DC organizer for the Youth Climate Safe movement, which is talking about the connection of animal agriculture and climate. I'm saying all of this at the beginning because I want to let you all know that if you are interested in any of those topics or any of those issues, I want especially young people listening to feel free to reach out to me afterwards if any of those piqued your interest. Those are just some of the things that I'm involved with. So feel free to move on to the next slide. Thank you, Lee. So some of the work that I've also done within these organizations and that I'm excited about is I've had the opportunity to lead campaigns for plant-based food options, and that was at the international chains Dunkin' and Starbucks, and I led campaigns which had petitions over 15,000 signatures for both of those, and they ended up implementing around 9,000 new locations each, which is really, really exciting and great opportunity to lead those campaigns. I was also involved in bringing the climate strikes movement to the United States. So if you might remember from earlier in 2019, the climate strikes first started out in Europe. And for any of us who are based in the United States, you can understand how important it is for the United States to also take action on climate as the largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases, as a country that was leaving the Paris Agreement. All of these different issues are reasons why young people had to put pressure on our politicians and on our leaders, right? So that's what I was thinking. And I got together with a small group of young people at that time in the US. And we tried to figure out how we were going to bring the movement here. And I especially focused on the DC climate strike based around the DC area right now. And that was a national climate strike for the first US participation in the international climate strike. So I thought that was really, really important. And I'm so glad that movement has continued moving on to September 20th, which was another International Climate Strike Day, the largest youth mobilization to date. And now that we're online, we had Earth Day online, which you guys might have tuned in, Earth Day Live, that 72-hour live stream organized by youth organizations. So really exciting to see that continuing and continue to build in the US and around the world. I am also the co-founder of a new campaign, which I invite you all to take part in. It's for climate-friendly food at the United Nations Climate Conference. This is a youth-led international grassroots campaign, and we've already gotten support from organizations including Greenpeace International and Friends of the Earth. And right now we're hosting a video campaign highlighting young people and their voices on why food systems are connected to climate and why we need climate compatible food at climate conferences to really address that connection and the potential for climate mitigation there. So you can check us out at Food at COP on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll talk about some more about social media handles and connecting with us later. I also have my Instagram and Twitter here where you can connect with me, and another great place to get in contact with me is through my email, and that's the best way really for me to connect you with any organization or campaign that I mentioned that you might be interested in. Just want to emphasize that anyone can get involved in this work. And one of the best ways is to directly reach out to the organization or to activists that you know in these organizations. And for the most part, we'll be more than happy to connect you because these movements need more people. So if you're interested, we more than welcome you. My reasons are connected to how urgent the climate crisis is, how it's already threatening my communities. I am from Brazil, where we have the Amazon rainforest fires that have smoke going all the way down to communities I know in southern Brazil. And also I immigrated to Florida after that. And the climate disasters, especially hurricanes, are worsening there. And there are communities around the world which are already facing the climate crisis right now. So this is a very urgent issue, and also because you don't need to be a perfectly sustainable, perfectly best climate activist ever to join our movement. The key here is that we need people power. We need as many people, and especially the younger generations, if you're able to get involved, that is so much more powerful. I know we shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to be activists as youth and as children and as young people. But if you are able to get involved and join others in your generation, we are really building a movement here, and we more than welcome you. So please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, Aryan, go ahead. You're up.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Aryan Ranjan. I'm an incoming senior at American Heritage High School in South Florida. But before I even go further, I would just like to say for all of you guys actually watching and listening to a bunch of kids talking about something as important as the climate crisis, I definitely do want to applaud you for taking the time out of your daily lives to really think about an issue so important to all of us and just understand that you are the reason why the climate movement is so powerful and it's making a huge impact today. But for me personally, I actually realized how important the climate crisis was when I actually visited my grandparents back home in India when I was just a little kid. And to see how bad the pollution was in some of those cities was just unbelievable. And to realize that there wasn't a lot being done to clean up those areas was even more unbelievable. And I just wanted to make sure that if we had the chance back home in the United States to keep our country clean, then we should take every step to ensure just that. And so when I came back to Florida, I actually just kind of looked up some local climate organizations near me. And that's when I first got involved with Citizens Climate Lobby, which is a nonpartisan grassroots advocacy organization focused on bipartisan federal legislation to actually combat the climate crisis. And in fact, I've spent over 3 years in that organization just with my local chapter, and I've just been growing from there. I now serve as the political liaison to Senator Rubio's office in the hopes that we can find this bipartisan climate solution. And when I tell people that, a lot of people kind of raise their eyebrows and they're like, well, why Senator Rubio? I think that everyone, no matter your race, no matter your socioeconomic background, no matter what you're doing, there is an equal place for you to fight against the climate crisis. And it's just your duty and your obligation to take that extra step and kind of push that effort. And so I've been working closely with Senator Rubio's office and CCL in terms of writing letters to the editors and getting our word out there, especially with a message as powerful as fighting against the climate crisis. And I've also kind of grown more from just Citizens Climate Lobby into some of my own individual efforts. At my school, I founded the Climate Change Club, and we're going 2 years strong with that. We've kind of spread ourselves apart into 3 different departments, depending on what students would like to do. Because I firmly believe that young kids, especially as you can see in this virtual room, we have to be the ones leading this effort, especially because when our leaders act like children, it's only fitting that the children act like the leaders. And this is just a very good example of that. So in that organization, we've kind of divided ourselves into political lobbying for kids who are really interested in meeting with local elected officials. We also have a writing department for kids who really like to kind of get their message out there through writing. And we kind of write to local newspapers. For me personally, whether it's the Miami Herald or the Sun Sentinel, Palm Beach Post, there's plenty of newspapers that are bringing attention to this topic. And hey, you get to get yourself published. So that's even an additional bonus to that. And the last thing is the more interactive departments where we conduct beach cleanups. COVID has definitely kind of inhibited what we can do in person, but that doesn't mean that the fight is over. We've kind of shifted to the more virtual setting where we're still trying to interview plenty of people who are definitely prominent in this fight against the climate crisis, whether it's someone from the Environmental Protection Agency or just your elected official. And I think that that kind of communication and that dialogue is what's really going to bring the policymakers and the youth together to find a solution that everyone is happy with. I've also created a new organization. You guys are actually the first to hear about it, called The Last Generation. And again, it's geared more towards students who are really interested in trying to figure out what the climate crisis is and kind of finding their role in it. Like I said earlier, everyone has an equal role to play in it. It's just that a lot of people don't know about the issue. And that's what my organization kind of hopes to help out with. And so it's kind of like what I've created with the Climate Change Club. We are interested in kind of getting our voices out there in terms of having a student-led newspaper where students from around the world can come together, write what their heart desires, and get their messages out there. There's no like procedure on getting published. If you have something that you really want to just say, we'll gladly publish you. And again, just meeting with other elected officials and endorsing legislation that is just so important in this fight, especially because we are in 2020. It's an election year for the United States. It's a very crucial year. And there is just so many things that needs to happen to make sure that we have a decent shot at fighting the climate crisis. And you can go to the next slide. Through my experience with Citizens Climate Lobby and with the Climate Change Club in my school, I actually got the opportunity to give a TED Talk on climate breakthroughs. In fact, if you just look it up on YouTube, you can just type my name and it should pop up, or you can type in the age of the climate crisis. And I think that the most important thing I want to tell people, especially young people, is that we always hear everything about the climate crisis is so grim that, the world's coming to an end. There's nothing really we can do about it. But I don't think so. I think if we look at all the good that's been happening, especially around the world with youth leaders who are leading this international movement, we are making a significant impact. Back in the 2000s, people were debating whether climate change was human caused or not. Now we're actually debating the solutions, and that shows significant improvement. And with more people who are interested, just like you guys, we can take that final step and make that final breakthrough. So that's what that conversation was about. And like I said earlier, I've written some letters to the editors. You can see that on the right side. Again, something everyone can do, something I encourage all of you to do. There is no age limitation. Whatever you want to write, people will get you published. And lastly, I just want to reemphasize that the real reason I'm fighting against the climate crisis and just joining so many different climate movements is that whether you're a singer or an engineer, there definitely is a place for you to fight the climate crisis. You have the definite skills, you have the passion to really care for this earth and care for the environment. Whether you want to label it climate change or not, whether you want to treat it politically or not, understand that it's a humanitarian issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's a healthcare issue. Everything you can possibly think of comes down to climate change. If you really want to make a difference, there's plenty of organizations. If you want to join The Last Generation, you can definitely reach out to me on Instagram, either my personal Instagram, which is below, or the official Instagram account for The Last Generation, or you can just send me an email and I'll be glad to contact you and definitely make sure that you find a place that you want to fight climate crisis. So thank you guys.
Excellent, amazing. All right, we're gonna go ahead and toss it over to Piper.
Hi everybody, my name is Piper Cole. I'm a botany student and I'll be entering my second year at the College of Florida this fall. Running with the botany theme, I decorated my first slide here with some of my favorite flowers that are actually native to Florida. So I developed an interest in the environment when I was around 14 years old. I made a lot of big life changes. I went vegan and I partook in like as many classes as my high school offered that were specialized with learning about the environment. So along with this, I developed a deep passion for plants. So last year I attended a conference regarding Florida's native endangered epiphytes as well as their conservation. And it was at this conference where I met Sean Patton, owner and founder of Stalking Savvy Environmental Consulting. And in January of 2020, I started working there as an intern. So during my time at Stalking Savvy, I've learned much about the importance of water quality, especially here in the state of Florida, where we rely so heavily on underground aquifers. We have so much surface water, not to mention just being surrounded by the ocean. And climate change has undoubtedly affected the water cycle that we all so heavily depend on. Sorry, one second. Sorry, with agricultural and industrial runoff, we got saltwater intrusion, changes in local and seasonal weather patterns are all issues that we are soon to face if we have not already. Sorry, one second. Not only do we need to announce a climate emergency. Sorry, I'm a little nervous here. This is my first.
Okay. Don't worry about it. Take your time. We're all your supporters.
Oh, thank you. Not only do we need to announce a climate emergency, we need to severely alter the American consumer standard of living to reduce our carbon footprint. We also need to focus on reversing the effects of climate change that are already in order to preserve our quality of water and our local ecosystems. So by stocking native plants and fish, Stalking Savvy is employing multiple modes of biological control, as well as implementing solutions to the nutrient pollution problem, all the while providing crucial habitat and food sources for native wildlife. One of Stocking Savvy's top priorities is the preservation of wetlands. Wetlands are hugely important in this fight against climate change because they are such concentrated carbon sinks. They sequester carbon by drawing it down into the soil, which is a very permanent way of sequestering carbon. Another aim of Stocking Savvy's is to kind of remodel the image of the perfect pond. I'm sure you've all seen these. They're common in like golf courses and just anywhere in Florida pretty much. It's like the cookie cutter pond. No plant life is usually present in these, and these water bodies are problematic for a number of reasons. First off, they don't sequester any carbon. Secondly, they're usually lined with common lawn grass, and if you don't have deep roots to stabilize steep shorelines, severe erosion often occurs, which can often result in a huge loss of property value. Now, these are also incredibly cost and labor intensive to maintain, and they're deeply vulnerable to native nuisance species such as algae, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with algae, as well as deeply problematic invasive species such as water hyacinth. Those can be seen choking out entire water bodies, preventing boats from passing through. They can create huge dead zones. So just hugely problematic. And the removal of these native nuisance and invasive species often requires very harmful chemical treatments, which can have long-lasting effects in ponds. So in this slide to the bottom left, you can see my lovely coworkers and I. That's Kendall and Augustus. That was us after we we scraped out piles upon piles of coontail from a pond. And this technique is called harvesting. So this is a permanent and eco-friendly way of removing nutrients from a pond, as opposed to using these harmful pesticides, which can kill off large quantities of plants if they're toxic enough and create dead zones, algae blooms, and they can decrease the dissolved oxygen levels in ponds. So Stocking Savvy also frequently holds events in order to spark the public's engagement and awareness for protecting the environment. Shown in the middle of the slide there is an example of what one of our booths looks like. This is where we just held a small native plant sale. Stocking Savvy also does art shows, we do public talks, we do invasive removals, and we stock native plants and plant them. So we're definitely not a one-trick pony. So next slide, please. Okay, so climate change can also be held largely responsible for the degradation of species diversity, with invasives expanding their northern range due to warming temperatures and outcompeting and ravaging natives along the way. Invasives are just naturally better colonizers, most of them are, and they're just much better at competing and utilizing resources. So while I was at New College, I had the opportunity to work closely with thesis students and my professors in studying the conservation of some of our endangered epiphytes on campus. So to the left, that is the giant air plant. I'm sure many of you have seen these around. It's also Tillandsia utriculata is the scientific name. And then to the right, we have Encyclia tempensis, or the butterfly orchid. So both of these epiphytes are already facing a lot of struggles that are directly human caused, such as illegal trade or human introduced weevils. And battling these, along with the long-lasting effects of climate change, I'm afraid could be too much for some of these species to bear. And we might lose some of these plants that are so characteristic of Florida. So I also had the opportunity at New College to study to partake in the removal and study of some aggressive invasives in Florida. So on the right, from the top down, we have Brazilian pepper, Australian pine, and carrotwood. Now, all three of these invasives have allelopathic properties, and they're expected to hugely shift the functionality of our ecosystems here in Florida. So plants are known to colonize, they're known to move, and ecosystems do change over time, but the rate at which this is happening is concerning, it's unnatural, and it leaves us with a very uncertain future, and climate change is only making it worse. So with all that being said, I think that plants can be a key contributor, and we can utilize them to fight the good fight against climate change. So those are my contacts down below. And I want to thank you all for listening. Sorry for the interruptions in the beginning there. It's my first big presentation, so thank you.
Anybody who likes plants is automatically my friend. So you already got an in there. Welcome, Joshua. Go ahead and take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to start by saying that I'm incredibly impressed by all the things I've heard so far. Being that I'm listening to everyone and what you're doing. Basically, sort of the stories, what brought you into the climate activism space, and I find them very striking. Also very sort of motivational, even for myself. Even though I'm already involved, of course. But I think that such stories like this really have the potential to get a lot of people to really start something. And also by saying that, I will say that the numbers are good, but also the quality is also very important. So we want a lot of people involved, but we also want them to focus on really getting something done and sort of have progress and not just sort of adding up to the numbers. Myself, I started an organization in Ghana in 2014 as a bachelor student. And the reason for starting this environmental organization was because I have a thing for water, and I don't know what that thing is. So I just say a thing. So I really like water bodies, whatever that may be. And I schooled in a coastal area. Meanwhile, I grew up in a landlocked area. So seeing the ocean was really fascinating. And I wanted to spend a lot of time there. At the same time, there's a lot of pollution going on. And the academic system is such that what you study in class is not what you see outside of the classroom. And it's still like that even today in most parts of the world. So the motivation was to get out of the classroom and start using the academic knowledge to start working together with communities, with what they know already, to start influencing change. So this was the start for my activism locally. So I was into education, advocacy, and empowerment. Where empowerment basically means that when you go to communities, you don't necessarily teach them something, of bringing in what you have put into frameworks, which is academically what we do, that we do research and we have like a framework, a structure, how things should work. And we sort of work together with communities on what they know. Most often indigenous knowledge, which cannot be, so to say, documented in a more scientific way, and working together with them, using their trends, their observation, how they notice changing communities and societies, so to work together with them. In some aspect, even using religion as a base for activism, which is also very effective depending on the culture and the country you're coming from. So this was the start for me. And through that, went into entrepreneurship. And I'll come to that on the second slide, why I went into entrepreneurship. But the entrepreneurship project is looking at converting plastic waste into resource for local communities, converting organic waste into compost and fertilizer for farmers, and stopping deforestation by using agricultural waste or biomass to create energy for local communities. And by doing this, employing local people, providing green jobs, putting in the concept of circular economy, that people start to see how there could actually be a closed loop community system where everything you generate go back into the system, which also means that by that doing, we get communities to really think of what they will call waste, because we want to tell them that everything you classify as waste, we should be able to use that for something good. So if you can't use it, then you don't have to dispose it off, so to say. And that also influences the way people perceive things such as waste. And even though waste management is not traditionally a climate topic per se, one of the effort and one of the things I'm also working on over the past years have been trying to draw the linkage between waste management itself and climate change, because waste is generally regarded as an environmental problem and not necessarily into the climate agenda itself. But when you think about air pollution, and I like what Aryan said, that when you are in a community where you have a lot of waste and a lot of burning, open burning going on, you have a huge air pollution problem. And if you are in an organic place where there's a lot of organic waste, you release a lot of CO2. So if you burn a lot of agricultural waste, you really contribute to climate change and carbon in the atmosphere. And this is something that was very close to my heart because it also really gets on with air pollution, which affects the health of local communities. So through that, started these enterprises locally that people can start taking leadership into that, mostly youth and women who are vulnerable in these communities to start working and also uplifting themselves. I then, through that, supported another organization, became a board member there, and now co-founded a Trees for Biodiversity, which is a new initiative, which is looking at not planting trees, but rather growing trees with communities in areas where biodiversity is most needed for their own agricultural and also forest conservation purposes. And in these photos here, you see on the left, you see doing activism, so to say, protest in Ghana. And on the right, you see a photo of me also sitting at the climate change conference, the recent one in Madrid. So what I see is that, I mean, climate activism is in multiple ways. On one side, sometimes you really need to sort of do what you need to do to get attention to a topic that is very close to your heart. And once that is done, most often that does not necessarily solve the problem. You get attention, institutions can sympathize with you, decision makers can sympathize with you, but your problem still remains a problem, even though you've gotten the attention. And the second step to that, or the next step to that, is really putting the demands forward in a way that can be used by these institutions. And this is why, after working so locally in Ghana with communities and working, influencing projects and everything locally, I realized that at certain point, you need to get really what is important to you, channeled through the policy way that you can actually get a message to decision makers to act on. Second slide, please. So, reason why I moved a little bit into sort of moving from community-based projects working with communities to entrepreneurship and enterprise was basically that after moving around the world through the activism and experiencing how different people see things in different parts of the world, I realized that climate change per se is not the problem. It's not the problem because inequality is the problem. If there's going to be a huge rainfall of, say, whatever millimeters in Bonn, where I'm sitting right now talking to you, and that same amount of rainfall happens in Accra, Ghana's capital, within 1 hour, the whole city of Accra will be flooded. It's gone. In Germany, the system is so strong because they have the financial means, they have the technical expertise ready at hand, and they have the resources to put that in place and make sure that if we have a 1% chance of getting really serious flood in the next 25 years, we are prepared. Ghana doesn't have that advantage as a country. So that inequality is what really makes this a big problem. So I saw that for us to be able to really get to a point where we're really dealing with climate change as a problem, we need to get countries to really have the skills, the resources, and the technical knowledge to be able to deal with it, right? So how to do that, and as a young person, was that, okay, I need to advance my knowledge and I need to advance my expertise on this topic. I had done protests, I had done community-based projects at a very, very local level, which was all important. But in terms of impacts, I mean, if you were able to influence one global policy, it goes a long way, of course, than sort of working with your local community to do sort of a small project on either waste management or air pollution or something. So my approach was, okay, we need to start also setting up enterprises locally such that local communities can start building their own economic progress. And usually what we have in sort of low and middle income countries is a lot of foreign investments that comes in. It doesn't necessarily make people within these communities rich. It rather extract the resources and the money away. And this is something that I find as a big problem as well. And again, this is inequality, and this has nothing to do with the climate. So if you have sort of whatever multinational company setting up a mining thing in the forest in Congo or somewhere in Ghana, they are mining raw materials, taking it away, refining it, selling it at high prices. Local communities, what they get is just the mining itself, and that is it. And they get like a labor salary and not the expertise, right? If I look at cocoa, for instance, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire produce 70% of cocoa for the whole world, for the industry. farmers are very poor. Cocoa farmers are very poor, yet all the chocolate industry and the chocolate companies in the US and Europe, super rich. These guys are super rich, right? And they have issues. Okay, we're going to sponsor some child labor projects in Africa because they are using children on the farm. Of course, they're using children on the farm. They are not rich. They don't have the money. You are buying the cocoa at a very cheap rate, and this is not helping anyone. So these were some of the things that I found as a very big problem in terms of trade agreements, in terms of expertise and knowledge. Again, even in academics, I mean, if you further your career academically, you realize that most of the issues that we're dealing with, you're going to find the research papers led by, let's say, global north professors and expertise. They are leading a lot of the research, producing a lot of the papers, and you're going to get high-ranked universities tagged as expertise in these topics. But most of the things they're talking about are in global south. And yet you will not have really global south expertise on these issues. Again, we need to decolonize knowledge in a way that knowledge is produced where the issues are. And people from these areas and these countries have to be respected, have to be given the right credibility that they have lived experiences of these issues to be able to talk about it. So these were some of my issues, things that really strike me. And the way I'm dealing with that is, one, advancing my education and my knowledge. So I'm currently a student at the United Nations University here in Bonn, where I'm doing a master's in environmental risk, learning from some of the best professors in the field of climate change. And through that, get the knowledge and be able to go and support my country, and also be able to sort of tell the narrative the way I think it should be told, by people who live in these countries, who have expertise in these countries, rather than having sort of a very global north narrative to the climate crisis we have now. Second part is producing research documents, and sort of, like I said, if we keep allowing knowledge to be sort of led by the global north, it's not going to tell the narrative of people who really are the front lines, right? And most of us, we want to work for people who are the front lines, who are really facing the impact. And one way or the other, all of us on this call right now are privileged, because look, we are here on Zoom having a conversation. That alone shows that we have a little bit of privilege. We understand the issue to a certain degree. That is great. How do we get other people to get to that level? And how do we get policymakers to prioritize getting knowledge to these people? So one of the things I did last year was to work with some colleagues around the world to produce a paper, which was called Adapt for Our Future. Basically to say that current decision makers need to start adaptation strategies now, so that our future is secure. But they can't do that without working together with us young people. And that was a very important paper, which was done last year. And this year, building upon that, the Global Center on Adaptation has picked up on it and producing, sort of putting resources behind it to establish a youth adaptation network, which I will invite everyone to join, everyone listening to this, join the Youth Adaptation Network, which will come up next month. It will be launched next month by the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General, yeah. And this network will be that to get political support to put young people at the heart of adaptation, because even if we take all the CO2 in the atmosphere, which I don't think is possible over the next few years, and if we stop CO2 now, we're still going to have the impact of climate change coming. I mean, for the small island developing states, for Africa, for Southeast Asia, for Latin America, we already seeing it. We don't have 10 years. It's happening now, right? Maybe for Europe, for US, and for some parts of the world where technology is much advanced, resources really available, they have 10 years to figure things out, but we don't have that. So that is very, very present. And the focus is to really put young people and our aspirations at the heart of this. I'm going to talk about my why, even though I've said it so many times. My why is simply that dignity of people and communities have to be preserved. And we need to start seeing the oneness of life. So even though I'm very critical in everything I'm saying about global north, global south, about decolonizing knowledge, about inequalities, I also see that the only way we can do this is really learning from each other. So we need a lot of sort of north-south collaboration, south-south collaboration, sort of countries learning from each other, sharing knowledge, sharing expertise, and sharing technology so that we can build together. And one of the beautiful things I like about my activism is basically community building. So on the picture on the right, you see clearly, I like that people from different races, different cultures come together, work together. I also really like that whatever community you are in, you try to really mobilize community to come behind you so that you can work together. I'm going to mention about real food system very quickly because I think that is very, very important. So in the next 30 seconds, just spare me that. So the food systems in general have not really had a lot of momentum when it comes to climate. In 2017 at COP23, this was when it was picking up, that we realized that agriculture will suffer from climate change. This was the normal narrative, that because of the drought and flood, we're not going to get food insecurity. But at some point, we also realized that, look, it's not just going to suffer from climate change, but it's really one of the main causes of climate change. So we need to act on that. So it's really important that if you see climate change as something very important, I would say that food systems in general and the broader agricultural system is something that you need to look into. And in doing that, also see that there's not one solution for anything when it comes to climate change. There's not one solution that will fit the whole world. So in some parts of the world, because of trends, lifestyle, resources, some solutions are perfect. In other places, it will not be. So the solutions that will work for India will probably not work for Germany because of population, because of culture, because of priorities and lifestyle. So in all our form of activism, one thing that I like to advise people is really understand the issue, understand the context, understand where you are, and know what works best for where you are so you can get the results and the impact. At the same time, really advance your knowledge. We have a lot of knowledge right now. We just need to look it up and read it and understand it. At the same time, we can also create new knowledge. And one thing I have seen with the climate strike movement was the ability of young people to educate adults, whereas before it was only adults educating young people. And now we have this intergenerational knowledge transfer that not only adults can educate us, but we can also educate adults. So don't be scared. Wherever you are, if you get a chance, really tell what you think. If you have the solutions, offer it. We need to discuss the solutions and we need to implement it. Thank you.
Incredible. Thank you so much. All righty, Tasnim, it's your turn.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Like everyone has said before, it's an honor to be amongst all of you, and I've already learned so much. So yeah, my name is Tasnim Mellouli. I'm from Orlando, Florida. I was raised here. I'm currently an environmental studies student at UCF. And right now I work as an editor for the undergraduate research journal at UCF as well. And I feel like I've always been interested in the environment and climate since I was like a child. I feel like I had this connection with this like subject and with this area. But I would say like definitely my path began starting in college. And I'm just gonna highlight like a few of the experiences I've had that have like typically like nourished me and enriched me and like has really shaped my outlook on this issue. But there are just so many other things that have happened as well. So yeah, when I started college, I interned at Organized Florida, and I was working with them to put on this conference called Power Shift to engage the youth and just communities in general, vulnerable communities to act on climate and to hold our officials accountable and so on. And I think from that moment, I really learned a lot about community power and a lot about power dynamics and just how like environmental justice and climate justice are intertwined with so many other issues. And then afterwards, at first I was a STEM student, and I did research with in wetland biogeochemistry, which makes me sound smart, but honestly, I just played with mud and like some plants sometimes. But I think with that experience, I really I learned a lot about the emphasis on education. I think literally getting your hands dirty and connecting with the land is so important. Just a very authentic way to connect yourself to this earth that we're trying to save. And in the pursuit of education, I feel like it's just so important to keep going back to that, keep going back to being, one with the earth, and at the same time pursuing education and learning, because, really it doesn't stop, and there's just so much to know. And the more we know, the better we can be prepared to face these challenges. So with that research, I was able to like present my project at different conferences. And I was thankfully able to be a mentor and a mentee for other minority students in STEM. And I think that was especially powerful because I think you'll find that a lot of people who come from like different cultural backgrounds have like different outlooks on climate and the environment. And I think it was just so enriching to learn from other people's perspectives, you know, and to see how we value things differently, or in just in a different perspective. And I think that was incredibly empowering. And right now, like I said, I'm the associate editor for the undergraduate research journal at UCF. And I think with that, you know, I'm learning a lot about how to disseminate information and how to communicate science and how to communicate, you know, issues that we care about a lot to the general public. So yeah, so I think like with these main experiences, I think they definitely like shaped my outlook. And I think the lessons that I've learned from that, you know, just like sum it up, has just basically those lessons have shaped my approach. And my approach is that I want to center vulnerable communities, uplift their voices, and also like address the power dynamic that's like missing or that's there, you know. And I think along with that, I think it's incredibly important to be authentic in your, you know, as your whole self. I know, like, you know, growing up as like a Muslim and, you know, a hijabi, like visibly Muslim woman, and like as an Arab and as a woman, you know, just as a person in general, like it's a little bit hard to show up as your whole self to a space. But I think it's discrediting yourself, but then also other people are missing out when you do that. So I think throughout all these things, and, you know, learning more about the climate and everything, I think it's also had a personal impact where I've been able to come up as my whole self, you know, and to be authentic. And then when you're authentic yourself, you're able to really give your best to the issue that we care about. And I think that was one of my definite like approaches, is to be authentic in who you are, and go with that as you work on this issue. I think the other thing that I've enjoyed and with these different experiences is protesting. I love, like, I don't know what it is, but I just love protests. And I think there's like a lot of power and solidarity with others and unifying with other communities, and just literally hearing the voices of other people, you know, advocating for a cause that we all care about. And I would say, if you want to go to the next slide, I would say another thing is shifting the narrative is also important. I think we hear, like, you know, a few things about climate and it's like consistent, but there's just so much more that we don't hear about. And so I think just understanding like what the narrative is about, and then also taking the opportunity to shift it wherever you can and whichever space you're in, is also very like powerful. I would say that my why, it's kind of like what you guys are all have been saying. Like, I truly believe we're all interconnected, you know, with the earth, with plants, with the water, with each other, you know, like we're all like family. In my mind, like I think we're all family, you know. So I can't, like, for me, because of this connection, you know, I feel it very deeply. I can't just turn away from it, you know. So this is like, I feel like it's very deep inside of me to work on this, and to fight for it. And I think at the end of the day as well, like, all of life should be respected and honored, you know. And I think that's like indisputable, you know. It has to be uplifted and honored. And it's not just our life, you know, it's also like plant life and, you know, water and the rocks and the mountains, you know, everything, because all of it is bringing life. You know, it wasn't just, it's not just us, you know, like water brings us life, and trees and everything. So I think looking at it from a very interdisciplinary perspective, like Lee was saying, and like just at a very authentic point, and also looking from within as well. Like I mentioned, it's also like as I go through this process of working on this issue, I feel like I'm also like deepening the roots in myself as well, because I feel like the more I learn about it, the more I work on it, the more I want to love others more, you know, the more I want to, like, you know, bring honor and respect to other living beings more, you know. So yeah, and then the other why is, of course, I think my faith first and foremost informs most of my activism. Besides like working on climate issues, like I've worked on like immigrant issues and like Islamophobia and like that kind of thing, and all those things are intersectional with climate justice. And I think my faith has been integral to giving me that approach. It's definitely my biggest why, and I think it's because it has such a very beautiful message about nature and the environment, and it's, you know, it's really nice. What else? Let me think. Yes. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention another thing. So with my approach, you know, besides like, you know, feeling that we should be authentic and that we should center vulnerable communities, I think we should also address the inequalities that climate change exacerbates, and the fact that they already exist, and the fact that they come from a system that's in place that perpetuates climate injustice and environmental injustice and all the injustices. So I think when I look at the climate issue, I step back a little bit, and definitely like we need to be working on the local, but then at the same time we should also be looking at what is systemically happening and how can we dismantle that. And yeah, and I'll let you. Thank you for having me. I think that's it.
Beautiful, awesome. All right, Christy, you're up.
All right, hello everyone. So my name is Christy Folk. My pronouns are she, her, and I just want to say everyone has been so amazing so far. I have such tough acts to follow, but I'll do my best. I think it's really important for me to start out by acknowledging my privilege as a white person and as a person who was born in a country like the United States, which has afforded me opportunities to live without oppression as a result of the color of my skin or as a result of neighborhoods I've lived in and things like that. So I'm currently a STEM educator at the Orlando Science Center. I'm based in Orlando, and I've been working there a little more than a year. I'm pretty passionate about education, especially science education. I got my background in my bachelor's in environmental science from the Honors College of FAU. So pretty much I was a kid, and then I started teaching children as soon as I wasn't a kid anymore. So I've always loved sharing my passion for sustainability and educating others on climate change and just casual conversations whenever I get the chance. And so my route kind of into climate activism, I've sort of been in unofficial climate activism or a climate activist all my life. I can remember around 5th grade when An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore first came out, and the documentary kind of opened my eyes to what was happening. And then I was like, well, I gotta do something about this. And one of my earliest climate change debate memories of me debating with someone about whether climate change was real or not was during summer camp one year. I was in maybe 6th or 7th grade, and I was just arguing with another camper about whether or not climate change was real and trying to convince them that the science shows that things are happening and we need to do something about it. But anyway, so I didn't actually start calling myself a climate activist until actually about a year ago when I attended the 0 Hour Youth Climate Summit in Miami. And once I did some of those sessions and kind of learned more about what it was like to be an activist, and at the end when they were like, you are now an ambassador, you are now enabled to be a climate activist, I was like, okay, I guess I'm one. I guess I could start officially calling myself one. And so I through 0 Hour, I signed up for a bunch of organizations and got connected with Ideas for Us in Orlando, since that's where I was from. And so I've worked with Ideas for Us, got involved with Fridays for Future Orlando, and ended up being the chant leader for the September and November global climate strikes in Orlando. I enjoy dressing up as the Lorax, if you have ever seen the Lorax at any of those strikes. And so that was kind of my foray into global climate striking. And so if we could switch to the next slide. So in addition to doing the climate strikes, the big global climate strikes in September and November, and then also the one during Earth Day online this past April, I wanted to get more engaged with the Fridays for Future movement, and that Greta Thunberg, with the idea of just being there, just being a presence in front of the city hall, and just kind of using your existence and your devotion of time to just say, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe in. And so I really like the idea as an introvert to be able to just like be in that space and not have to actually talk to anyone, just hold up a sign and be like, this is what I believe. And so once the whole COVID crisis started, our Fridays for Future movement was really good about pivoting online. And so what I did was I took my Fridays for Future strikes onto Facebook. And so every Friday, I've been posting a picture of me with a sign, usually my whiteboard or one of the other signs I've made, on my Facebook page with some hashtags, just to keep me accountable and keep me in the mindset that we can't forget about this larger crisis that is looming over us in the midst of these other crises, the COVID crisis, the racial crisis, all this going on. And so I do that mostly as a way to remind me and the people I know that this is something we should care about. And then a few other campaigns that I am currently involved with are one with Clio Institute, the Climate Emergency Declaration campaign. So this idea of having governments declare a climate emergency and publicly acknowledge that this is a crisis. And I think that's the first step in actually taking action. That's really important. And so our campaign is currently going to have Orlando and Orange County pushing to have them pass resolutions to declare climate emergencies. And then eventually the state of Florida, once we've built up enough support locally, and then eventually Congress overall the United States to declare a climate emergency and really acknowledge publicly that this is a crisis. So that's the first, one of the first campaigns I'm really getting into right now. And then another one that I've started helping with a little bit is Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. I've actually been a little bit involved with this for about a year now. So in Orlando, Florida specifically, a lot of the electricity, most of the electricity that people receive is from OUC, Orlando Utilities Commission, which unfortunately is currently run by about 95% fossil fuels, which generate the electricity for Orlando. And I just think there's such a disconnect between saying Orlando is a leader in sustainability when most of its electricity comes from fossil fuels when we're in the Sunshine State. And so that's something I'm also passionate about, is kind of advocating for solar energy in Orlando. And so those are the major campaigns that I'm involved with, and that all stems from my why, which is it tends to change, but currently I envision a world in which people are informed and inspired to live low impact lifestyles that respect the rights of present and future generations. And I think something that we don't talk about enough is something I like to mention is that climate justice is racial justice, and climate justice is women's rights justice, and climate justice is LGBTQ justice, and it's all these other types of justice. It's social justice, and you can't have one without the other. But something that we don't talk about as often is intergenerational justice, and I think that's really important. And we're especially seeing the importance of intergenerational justice with how, for example, the United States is dealing with the coronavirus, and how the most vulnerable people, our elderly and even our children, aren't getting the proper care that they need. And so it's this idea of recognizing that people at different stages of their lives deserve different treatment. It's like the difference between equality and equity. Like, you need to take care of those people. And so I think it's also intergenerational justice refers to the fact that people who are older adults have gotten to live their life so far enjoying a clean planet, relatively clean planet, enjoying nature. But future generations, the ones that are coming after us, like our age and younger, might not enjoy something that older generations got to enjoy. We don't have the privilege of seeing those things. And so that's really what I think I'm fighting for, is that intergenerational justice. And it inspires me to work with kids every day and see how fresh they are and how unbiased and unjaded they are. They don't already think that the world doesn't work out and that they can't do anything about it. They think there's potential for change, and I think that's really important. So those are the campaigns that I'm involved with, and there's my email. Another way you can find me is just look up my name on Facebook, and that's where I post my Fridays for Futures. But yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. For those of you who are watching, feel free to drop some questions in the chat. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to them because these speakers are all incredible and I want to dive a little bit deeper, but we can always follow up with your questions and answers later. First and foremost, I'll just take some of the questions that I prepared and kind of lump them into one and have each of you, have the floor. I really want to communicate messages to all different generations, but predominantly the youth. And through that, sometimes your personal stories and talking about things that are hard to talk about, like how you think climate change is going to impact your future. How is climate change currently affecting your decision making? I'm 30 years old. I am looking into getting a house, but I live in Florida and we're on the front lines of sea level rise. And we are consuming more water out of our aquifers faster than we're replenishing it here in this state. And so these are tough conversations that are happening inside of my home that I feel need to be happening outside into the homes of other people that might not really feel comfortable sharing these conversations with their neighbors, with other community members. But by having those conversations, by challenging those conversations, that's how you make problems known so that we can put pressure where pressure is needed for it to see change. If we just pretend there's not an issue and that we're not afraid, then there's silence. And silence is the most dangerous thing when we're trying to combat climate change, right? Apathy is our greatest enemy. So I want to ask each of you, especially one of my questions is, what do you think about your future and how does climate change affect your dreams? And I also want to ask about what message you want to give to that next generation or your generation or even older generations, but predominantly the youth. Through answering this question, what message do you want to get to them when expressing how climate change is going to impact your future? So Aaria, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, so whenever somebody or anybody asks me what I think about my future, I have two phases. The first one is, I think, why should I think about a future if I'm not going to have one? And I go through a lot of eco-anxiety. It makes me really worried that I won't even get to see the next year. And there's not many people that I know in my community that I can connect with on that level about my eco-anxiety. And that puts me down a lot. But then when I speak to people in these organizations like Ideas for Us and all these environmental industries, it brings back that hope that we can make a difference. And so that's the second phase. And what I would like to say is that if you also have that fear, that anxiety, just speak about it. Spread the knowledge, get it out there. You'll feel better. You'll have more hope in the future that you want. Yeah. That's it.
Perfect. Lana, how about you?
What I think about my future is that I would like to have a future. And something that happens to me a lot as a climate activist is oftentimes I'll hear from people in positions of power, our leaders, oh, you're so inspiring. You're going to have such an amazing future. Definitely keep pursuing climate and environment. And I'm sure you guys can understand why this is a problem. I'm not interested in becoming a climate scientist or an environmental scientist or an expert because the experts already have the science developed and no one is listening to it. We already have enough information. We know what is happening. I mean, obviously we can dive deeper into different issues, but we know the basics. We know that we need to be acting and that we're not listening to the information that's already available. And I think for myself and for my generation and everyone younger than me, climate change is already impacting a lot of people around the world and a lot of communities. I'm from Brazil and I moved to Florida, and both of those communities are being impacted. There are indigenous and frontline communities that have already been impacted first and most in this situation. And I think that there's no question that climate change will impact our futures and is a significant threat to the futures of younger generations. And before I speak to youth, I want to talk to older generations, which is to say that we need your support. I know it's wonderful to hear from younger people and it can feel really inspiring, but it's not enough. Like what Josh was saying, like us doing our climate protests, that doesn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Us speaking and having our voices heard, wonderful. It still doesn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions, still doesn't put us on the path to climate mitigation. And we don't have time to wait until we have environmental science degrees or until I graduate or someone becomes a climate scientist. We need to act right now. So we need that intergenerational support and we need to work across generations. And that is vital. We're not going to succeed if we don't have that. For young people, I know this can sound really terrifying. All of these issues cause a lot of climate anxiety, eco-anxiety, but know that if you are concerned, it feels a lot better for most of us who are activists if you get involved, if you start taking action. Not only are you putting us closer to the path of taking action and doing this advocacy, but meeting a group of people who also cares about this issue, who's also doing something, can really help. And there is a community out here for you. There are people already involved. There are all these organizations that we named that you can get involved with. So we're here for you and we welcome you to work with us.
Amazing, thank you. Aryan, go ahead for it.
Yeah, as has already been said, I definitely fear for what the future is going to look like. You know, living in Florida, I don't want to be in a place that could very well be the next Atlantis. I definitely do want to live out a future that is just full of adventure, just as the generations before us have gotten. But at the current rate we're going, it doesn't seem that that kind of possibility exists because we've kind of like classified this fight against the climate crisis as environmentalists and climate activists and lobbyists. But quite honestly, if you ask me, those shouldn't be real things. That's just a human thing to do. We have one planet, and I think that it's just common sense to do everything in our power to make sure that we're taking care of our planet as much as possible. You know, as human beings, we have this innate responsibility to take care of our homes, to protect our homes. The planet is our biggest home. And if we all work together, we can very well make the changes we need. You know, a couple of years ago, I was definitely very scared that there was nothing we could do to solve the climate crisis because we had just gotten to a point of no return. But now that I've started getting involved with climate organizations, now that I've started meeting with all of you just here today, it is a sure sign of hope that we are getting somewhere. Whether you're in Europe or Southeast Asia or Africa, there are significant improvements being made. And, you know, not only am I fearing for myself, I'm feeling for the future generations. I'm fearing for my children and my children's children. You know, this isn't a fight that's going to be won in a day. It'll take years. And the more time we waste, the more time is destroying our planet. And, you know, my philosophy is for all the people listening, for the older generations, for the younger generations, every revolution starts with one person, right? We're all here. There's 9 of us here. I don't know how many of you are watching or how many of you will see this. You're all part of a revolution now. And it's your decision, really, to either join or just watch our planet suffer. And I think the time for watching and spectating is gone. Protecting our environment is not a spectator sport. There's very individual things that you can do to make sure your voices are heard, to make sure that knowledge is reached across the globe. And we've started doing that. But it can't just continue with the amount of people we have. And I know that political leaders are kind of a big problem here, a big barrier. It's not just a United States problem, it's plenty of countries around the world. But it's just a matter of when that country will change their decisions. I know that sometime down the line, we will realize that climate change is a major issue and a lot more of us will start taking it seriously. But I don't want to reach that point. As Joshua mentioned earlier, even if we take away all the CO2 right now, that doesn't mean climate change is over. It's still going to affect everyone. And for once, I would really like for a generation, hopefully our generation, to leave the next generation with a better planet than when we first found it. And I sincerely think that we have the ability to do that. And I know that a lot of people are still very skeptical, saying that, you know, the politics makes it impossible, especially in a country like the United States, where powerful people kind of rule everything. But to that, I say it's not completely true. You know, with all of us joining here today, I sincerely believe that the power of the people much outweighs the people in power. And for all of you guys watching, I really want you to kind of hear those words and act on them. It's not enough to just say climate change is an issue. It's the time to act. We should have been acting yesterday. So every single day, whenever you guys are waking up, whenever you guys are just kind of seeing your privilege, whenever you guys are seeing your communities, whenever you're seeing the people that are being affected, even if you don't think it's yourself, just try to do everything in your power to really fight for yourself, for your neighbors, for your race, for humanity in general. And you might not get thanked for it, but I'm sure that you would definitely like a world where everybody acted fast rather than a world where no one did anything at all.
Thank you so much. So well worded. All right, Piper, go take it away.
Okay. Well, particularly for me, with my specific line of interest being botany, it's really hard to ignore climate change. I mean, these are really intertwined. And even in the past 100 years or so, the field of botany has changed so much, and it means something so much different to be a botanist than it did. I mean, when I was younger, I kind of had this image of myself like exploring rainforests and like deserts and looking for cool plants and like discovering their benefits. But as I got more into the field and I learned more about climate change and its impact, it's kind of twisted that narrative. It's become more about preservation of the plants that we have rather than discovery. And I know that climate change affects everybody in every line of interest, but botany, like I said, is very intertwined. And like Lana said, I don't want to be a climate scientist. That was never the goal or interest or anything, but with my field of interest, botany, I feel like it's my duty to kind of work in those interests and figure out what I can do as a botanist in the future to fight this fight. So that's my take on it.
Do you have any messages for the younger generation that's listening?
Yeah, I would say that this generation, I already see a lot of potential in it, and I think we're capable of a lot. I do have a lot of hope just from seeing everybody around me, seeing their dreams and their goals and their initiative. It's really inspired me. And I don't think we need to wait on permission or validation from superiors to make a difference. We can just find those in the community that share our interests and who respect our initiative, and we can just go out there and just make it happen. So, yeah.
Amazing. Very well said. All right, Joshua, what's your answer?
Thanks everyone for what has been said. I've been thinking about this, and what I'm thinking is that, look, we don't live in a world of common sense. It's very basic. If we live in a world of common sense, we wouldn't have been here. So when I think of my future, one thing that really came up when you asked that question was, I think somewhere around 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I was really keen about seeing the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And I mean, over the years, half of it is gone already. So most likely in my time on the planet, everything will be gone. So the likelihood of we actually losing really big part of the ecosystem we live in is very, very high, right? So sort of, I'm just trying to scale it down so that when people think about climate change, sometimes it seems a bit abstract. It seems a bit like, yeah, it's gonna happen, but maybe 100 years, we don't know. But the thing is, it's actually not so far away. It's really here. And depending on where you are, you might feel it much more quicker, much more faster than when you really sit in a very comfortable, say, developed country where government really take care of everything. There's so much resource that you don't feel it. Even yet, the point is that when I think about my future, one thing that makes it really difficult is profession, career. Now everyone's saying, I don't want to be like this, I don't want to be like this. So what are we going to be? That is the biggest question. What are we going to spend most of our lives contributing to, right? So maybe we don't want to be the lobbyists, we don't want to be the scientists, we don't want to be that. But my message to young people in general is really look at a profession where you can easily contribute to the solution much faster. Because we can do on an individual level, that is great. But like I said before, if you influence policy at the national level, the impact and outcome is super high. So we need to really look at where do I have the biggest influence and impact in terms of when you think about climate change. Understand the issue better, of course, but really when choosing your career, choose a career where you know that you are really helping build a solid system that, one, will leave a better planet for the next generation, but also, really important, leave a better generation for the planet, because the planet itself did not do anything. It's rather the generations that really mess things up. So we really need to leave a better generation for the planet. And this is what I see it. Thanks.
Thank you. Tasnim, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think about this a lot. And it's really scary to think about. And I have like my own dreams and aspirations, and then sometimes I'm like, what's the point? You know, I feel like it's like if I want to do like a graduate degree, but then I'm thinking like, okay, but it's like the whole world is in chaos, and like you're like studying or something. And I'm not saying it's not valuable, it is, but it's the kind of effect that it has on me. You know, thinking about climate change and how it's going to affect me, and like how that might change my future aspirations. And even like personally, you know, like, can I visit my family in Tunisia anymore? Should I have kids later? Should I not? It's just like a bunch of stuff. Like, it affects everything, you know, and it's why it's such a huge global issue, because literally every facet of life is being affected by it. So it's super overwhelming, you know. But I think my message and what I take from that is that we keep fighting because it's right, and we may not see the fruits of our labor just yet. We may not see it ever, but we keep doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I take some solace in that, and I try and like incorporate whatever thing I do later on in my life to fight for this, you know. And I will. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. Whatever I do in the future has to be, you know, like fighting for this. So I think I'm just gonna try my best. I think it's the only thing I can like think to do, because it's such a huge, overwhelming issue. And I would also say that like everyone has a role to play, you know, but everyone has to play. You know, like it's like group projects, it's like a team effort, you know. So it can't be on just the hands of the few. Everyone has to do something, you know, anything. And really, our voices carry a lot of meaning, and it can go very far, especially in this age. So I don't think we should underestimate ourselves at all, you know, and it's super scary, but we do what we can. Yeah.
Thank you. That was perfect. Christy, it's your turn.
Yeah, I echo everything that Tasnim just said. Totally agree. In addition, I want to kind of talk to everyone watching, and I like to give these little pep talks to myself because I really believe in the power of positivity and optimism. I think it's even more important to kind of be what I call irrationally optimistic in times like these, because if you can't envision a world that's better than the one we're in right now, if all you can see is the horror and destruction that's going on, you get paralyzed and you have no reason to act. And I think it's really important to find something that can actually drive you and really believe that things can change. And so something that I was just writing when I was listening to what everyone was saying is that climate change is a fight. And ultimately, if you are a climate activist, you're a fighter. There's no getting away from it. But so many people, they have to fight just to exist because they weren't born into privilege. So, for example, with me, I have a lot of privilege, so I have to use that to fight. And it's definitely not easy. It's not something that's comfortable. It's not necessarily enjoyable to be a climate activist, but you have to do it, and you have to it's the right thing to do. You have to internalize these issues and develop your moral compass and just base it in your values. You have to really establish what your values are, and identify them, and just try to live them day by day, because our lives are lived in such small scale. We don't live like weeks at a time. We take it day by day, and especially when things are so chaotic and crazy as they seem to be lately, you have to just look at each day as its own opportunity, and really try to seize the moment. And so I'm a firm believer in that, you can't get anywhere by getting comfortable. Being comfortable it's such an easy thing to fall into, but you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to seek change, not just outside, but inside. Like, you have to be reflective, really identify how you can make yourself a better person as you're going through this journey, even if you're not a climate activist or don't identify as one, but just think about how you can be a better person in general. And something that I had written down, a quote that I've had in my phone for a little while. I can't even remember where I heard it or when I wrote it down, but it's that you don't have to be the most well-spoken. You just have to listen and understand to be an advocate. Being an advocate is never a paid position. So to advocate and really stand up for what you believe in has to come not from outside incentives of money or anything like that. You have to do it because you can't not do it. And so something that I found is that with eco-anxiety and just feeling depressed about the prospects for climate change, sometimes you just have to let it break your heart. You just have to let it infuriate you, fill you with that emotion, and then you have to turn it around and use that to motivate you. Because you can't fight for something that you don't care about, and you can't care about something unless you feel passionate about it, and you can't feel passionate about it unless you are informed about it and actually do the work to educate yourself about it. And then once you know, you can't not fight for it. And so I really believe in the butterfly effect too, and that every little thing that you do can make a difference. One thing that somebody says to you or one thing you say to someone else may inspire them to live more sustainably or join the climate fight or just make a difference. So that's my 2 cents.
Very well spoken. Thank you so much. So, I wrote down some notes as you guys were each going through your responses. And I think just to drive everybody's point home, the people that are in the easiest and highest positions of power where they could actually make a switch, it's their greed that is holding us all back from making those progressive, drastic changes, right? And what do you think they want? For us to remain paralyzed by our fears and by our apathy, right? And if we could just drive one point home for you today, it's that we need to recognize our power in all this as individuals at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the distribution of wealth, okay? Because at the end of the day, those people that are in positions of power of greed hold those positions because we continue to submit our power, right? They are trying, especially for the youth right now, they are trying to get in front of our eyes. We're oversaturated with marketing and social media and ads. If we drive the demand, they will be put into a pressure position of changes that are needed. If we continue to have conversations where this becomes cool, because we're all young activists, like locking arms and wanting to see change, they're going to be forced to listen. If we're curving our spending behavior and voting with our dollar, they're going to be forced to listen. And it's, we need you, the person watching, needs to recognize your power in all of this. The decisions that you make, give yourself an audit when you wake up in the morning. What toothbrush am I using? What cleaning products do I use? Do I have to drive to the grocery store today? Could I carpool to work? Every single decision you make is making somebody else wealthy somewhere else. And if you can stop and break that cycle by changing your own behavior, you're relinquishing that power out of their hands and giving it back to yourself. And another thing that you should recognize is that when you are expressing your behavioral shifts, you're influencing other people too. People like certain things when they see their friends like certain things. So if you're making all these really cool, sustainable choices to go zero waste or to invest in recycled toilet paper or whatever it is that you're doing, post about it, share it. You know, you could be sharing the next cool music video that's whatever, or you could be sharing really awesome changes that you're making and make it a positive, cool, trendy thing that could influence, God only knows, 10, 20, 50 people that are in your network, right? Don't be afraid to be the person that talks about sustainability at a party when everybody else wants to just get drunk or, you know, enjoy their time. Find a way to make it fun, find a way to influence other people and engage them and challenge them. Also, know your power in building a relationship with nature, because, you know, we don't talk about mental health enough across the entire world, and nature is abundant. And if you could only understand your power when you are building that relationship, when you're planting a tree that you then see an animal build a nest in, let that build your confidence and your self-esteem. Let that feeling help you also grow your empathy. And you will influence other people in that relationship that you're building with nature. And you will also have another way to have therapy through that relationship. It'll build on your confidence. And, you know, last but not least, we have a very weird culture in the environmental movement where sometimes we shame each other. You know, I know one time somebody saw me carry a water bottle, and it was a plastic bottle that I had picked up, that it wasn't even mine. And somebody like attacked me in my photo about carrying a plastic water bottle. And I think that's not how you positively influence someone to be better. Shaming, that's not how you progress your community into seeing the community that you wish to see for your future. And the thing is that some people need a little hand holding, you know, like being a vegan. If you grew up in a culture that meat has a huge significance, and how you consume it and how it brings your whole family together, like Thanksgiving, for example, that is something that you can't just rip away from someone, and you can't shame them out of changing. But what you can do is send them a cool meal prep plan, or you can inspire them by sending them your receipt so that maybe they can see what you're purchasing. Maybe you can grow your own food and teach them how. So these are the types of things that give us power. And, you know, it's very overwhelming for those of you who are watching to think that you can have an influence. But I just, you know, look at all of these individuals. You guys could all just be partying and going to music festivals in a non-COVID world and not do anything other than go to school and get a 9-to-5. But instead, you're all here caring with your whole heart. And I just thank you all so much for your time. I'm so appreciative of each of you for sharing your story and your personal why, and all of the incredible work that you're doing in the community. It inspires me, and I hope it inspires everybody who's watching this. The last slide that we have up is some contact information for those of you who might want to get involved. We have viewers from all over the world, so please do not hesitate to reach out to any of these young leaders. And if you have any questions, which we're going to be taking some of the questions and doing some follow-up, please feel free to either drop them here or email us at or by visiting our website, or info@fleetfarming.org, contact@ideasforus.org, or visit our website, ideasforus.org. So thank you all so much, and I value and appreciate every single one of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having
You all
me.
did a great job. I am so